So you want to be a head coach in the National Football League. Yeah, well, if you're a Raider, a 49er, or a Ram, I don't think that you really wanted to do that. Mike Nolan got fired by the San Francisco 49ers, and Mike Nolan's a good football coach, and he will land on his feet again, and he's replaced by Mike Singletary, who it's time for him to be a head coach. And I love both Mikes. I do. I mean, there are certain coaches in this league I'm not real fond of, as I'm sure you're not, or I don't think are that good, or I don't think are difference makers. Mike Singletary has a chance to be a difference maker. But I also saw Mike Nolan become a difference maker with his football team, and he was fired, and here's why. Because the front offices, not so much in St. Louis, because they have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and they've drafted some bad players in the last 10 years, 8 years, but they get a Chris Long and a Carricker. These guys are players, and Chris Long's going to be a star. But when it comes to coaches, maybe they let Scott Linehan too long, maybe they didn't, but Haslett's made a difference in 2 weeks, and they've won 2 in a row, and Jim is a more fiery guy. But in those other 2 organizations, and I grew up a Raider fan, I've said it before, there was a commitment to excellence in Oakland, and there's all kinds of rings sitting in the trophy case in the lobby in San Francisco. But that's not going to happen anytime, anywhere in the near future. I don't care if the good Lord himself and Moses coach each team. Not going to happen, folks, and here's why. Because championship teams are won from the top to the bottom, all the way down to the equipment guy and the trainer. They got to be good in everything in between. But I don't care who the coach is. He may make a bit of a difference, but if you don't have the players with some accountability, and more than that, if you don't have ownership that has a clue. See, the people are afraid to answer to the Raiders and Al Davis, and I've got all the respect in the world for Mr. Davis and what he's done. But you know what? I was a good player when I was 14 years old. Okay, I'm not anymore. Oh, it's time to move on. Like why a guy walks out of when a guy can't go anymore, you get him out. And Al Davis, unfortunately, signs the paychecks. But if Al wants a championship back in Oakland, he's got to hire somebody else to run the team. He's got to turn it over to somebody else. So if you're a front office in Oakland or San Francisco and you're a coach, don't get too comfortable. Because some think Lane Kiffin shouldn't have been fired. Now Tom Cable goes and gets a win. And here's the deal. Patrick Willis, Frank Gore, some really good young talented players over there. Over at Oakland, they've got a D'Angelo Hall who's still a heck of a player. You got a Darren McFadden, Jamarcus Russell. You got stuff to build on. But you know what? I don't care unless you can stand up. You get a guy like Belichick or Jeff Fisher to come in there. And we got, you know what? Mike Singletary may be a Hall of Fame coach someday, and Tom Cable may get hired full time in Oakland. But you could even take those 2 great coaches, Fisher and Belichick, and stick them in there, or a Tony Dungy, and you know what's going to happen? They're not going to win 8 in a row because the people above them don't have a clue what's going on. So, you know what? I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear a yes man or a yes woman. I want a person who we understand who runs the show. And if the person is running the show, that they have a clue. But unfortunately, Mr. Davis, it's time for him to give it to somebody else. And once the DeBartolo family left and not having Dwight Clark and Carmen Policy, the 49ers went to hell in a handbasket. So the coaching profession, while there's some great things, pub and Super Bowl rings, and there's only one guy who wins 1 a year and a lot of money, it also blows, okay? So you don't want that gig if you're in one of those 2 cities in Northern California especially. But if you do get it, you're going to have to make changes, and you have to understand who the boss is. Mike Nolan was a good football coach, and Lane Kiffin maybe shouldn't have been fired. He's still going to get another chance along the way. Mike Nolan may also. They'll both be coaching. But the thing is that unless ownership and management have a clue above you, everything below you wilts. Okay? You don't build a house from the top to the bottom. You build it from the foundation. Well, in a football organization, the top has to understand how to build the foundation. And unfortunately, in those 2 organizations right now, they don't. So you want to be an NFL football coach? You got 30 other teams to choose from. Right now, with the ownership in place right there, I'm not sure that's where you want to go. I'm Sean Salisbury for Open Sports, and I don't want to be a coach for either one of those teams right now.
So you think you can tackle a pro? There's only one way to find out. Click on fantasy at opensports.com.